The glass in which the ego seeks to see its face is dark indeed. How can the ego maintain the trick of its existence? Except with mirrors. But where you look to find yourself is up to you. And that was a quote from Chapter 4 of A Course in Miracles. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Once Upon a Dream. In this series, we're looking at the themes of A Course in Miracles through the lens of children's stories so that we can facilitate and enrich our understanding of the Course's teachings in a very simple way. In this video, we're just looking at one single character from a children's story, the evil queen from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, rather than the story of Snow White herself. So we'll be looking at the themes of the Course as they relate to the vain, evil, narcissistic queen in the Snow White story. These themes include body image and identification, magic versus miracles, grandiosity, and other topics. But before we get started, here's a 10-second overview, a reminder of the story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, for those who are either unfamiliar with the story or for those who have forgotten.
You know the basic setup of Snow White. Girl talks to birds. Queen throws her ass out. She meets some short people. Eats some bad fruit.
She gets rescued by the prince, and then she lives happily ever after.
Sleep. The end.
So now that we've refreshed our memories about the Snow White side of the story, let's focus our attention on the evil queen. This story was one of the German folklore tales compiled by the Brothers Grimm, and it was originally called Little Snow White. And it's important for us to remember that the tales of the Brothers Grimm were not originally intended for children. They were more like morality tales or fables for adults. I forgot this at first, so when I was rereading the original Brothers Grimm version of Snow White, I was horrified. It's a very nasty story, and it doesn't even end with the usual happily ever after. The last line of the story is, the queen was forced to step into the red-hot shoes and dance until she fell down dead. Grim by name, grim by nature. The Snow White story was Walt Disney's first full-length animated movie, released back in 1937. The Disney version is a lot sweeter than the original story, but it still contains scenes of the attempted murder of a young girl, so you know. And the evil queen has made many other cinematic and stage appearances since then, most recently in the romantic comedy/children's film Mirror Mirror, and in the same year, the dark fantasy movie Snow White and the Huntsman. And there'll be a new live-action Disney version, with humans this time, coming out in 2024. So this story is never going away. The evil queen's physical appearance in the Disney movie was inspired by the aptly titled character, She Who Must Be Obeyed, from the movie She, which was released in 1935. And She Who Must Be Obeyed was a queen who was never supposed to age. So this theme of preserving the youth and the perceived beauty of the physical body as a misguided symbol for eternal life is a recurring trope in so many stories, past and present. Both the evil queen and her magic mirror are powerful metaphors for the way we view the human body. Our concept of aging, our collective attitude towards the passing of time, death, and body image, and so many other things that we just take for granted as part of the human condition, especially in Western cultures. And A Course in Miracles discusses all these human perceptions in detail. It says, here is the answer to every problem that will confront you today, tomorrow, and throughout time. In this world, you believe you are sustained by everything but God. Your faith is placed in the most trivial and insane symbols: pills, money, protective clothing, influence, prestige, being liked, knowing the right people, and an endless list of forms of nothingness, which you endow with magical powers. All these things are your replacements for the love of God. All these things are cherished to ensure a body identification, and they are songs of praise to the ego. So in the original story, the queen is described as very beautiful, but, the story says, she was proud and arrogant, and she could not stand it if anyone might surpass her in beauty. She had a magic mirror. Every morning she stood before it, looked at herself, and said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all?" To this the mirror answered, "You, my queen, are fairest of all." Then she was satisfied. But one day, when Snow White was 7 years old, when the queen asked her mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all?" it answered, "You, my queen, are fair. It is true, but Snow White is 1,000 times fairer than you." The story says, the queen took fright and turned yellow and green with envy. From that hour on, whenever she looked at Snow White, her heart turned over inside her body. So great was her hatred for the girl. The envy and pride grew ever greater like a weed in her heart until she had no peace day and night. Now in the course, all of our negative emotions are just expressions of fear. This story actually says the queen took fright, quote unquote. And this fright expressed itself as envy, pride, hatred, growing like weeds in her heart until she had no peace, a very evocative description. And one of the main aims of the course is for us to learn to let fear and all of its various manifestations and expressions to go, so that we can attain peace. And at the heart of the evil queen's self-obsession with beauty is a fear of not being good enough. In Disney's version, the mirror's voice is called the slave of the mirror, an imprisoned spirit, and the queen refers to the mirror as a magic mirror. However, the queen herself could be described as the slave of the mirror or the imprisoned spirit, because she needs the mirror, she's dependent upon the mirror to feel good about herself. And if the mirror doesn't tell her what she wants to hear, then she feels bad about herself. In the course, Jesus draws a distinction between magic and miracles. In chapter 1 he says, "Casting spells merely means affirming error, and error is lack of love." In the course, magic is described as attributing a godlike power to things that have no actual power, except for the power that we ourselves give to these things. Whereas miracles are entirely natural and are just the spontaneous effects of God's love that just occur organically once we allow ourselves to be vehicles for God's love and for expressing this love to others. The story of the evil queen is a mirror in itself, a reflection of attitudes in Western societies where a high value is placed on what society defines as beautiful. In these cultures, females, and now increasingly males as well, have been conditioned to place a value on the image that they see in the mirror. If you see the body as who you are, and if you feel that your body doesn't live up to your standards of beauty or your society's ideals of what the perfect woman or man should look like, you'll feel less than worthy. Society programs its people with the desire to be desirable, and we equate that or mistake that for being love. In some editions, in chapter 1, A Course in Miracles says that this misunderstanding and quest for human contact for the self has led to body image problems. You would think that in a society that places such a high value on perceived beauty, that those who are considered beautiful would be the most happiest people of all. But no, even those who are considered beautiful have problems with low self-esteem, are unhappy, and have their demons just like everybody else. Ironically, some individuals who are worshipped for their beauty or their talent are even unhappier and even more tortured than everybody else. It's particularly challenging for people in very high-profile careers, like in the entertainment industry or in the world of sport, where a high premium is placed on the body's appearance or the body's prowess. Also, it's really depressing to reach the pinnacle of your field and to be admired and respected for it, and yet still realize that you have all the hang-ups and the neuroses and the flaws that tormented you before you became successful and famous and admired. Because, as it's often said, wherever you go, there you are. We are only happy when we are connected with and are embodying what we truly are. In lesson 110 of the workbook, which is entitled I Am as God Created Me, we are told, you are as God created you. Today, honor yourself. Let graven images, you made to be the Son of God instead of what he is, be worshipped not today. Deep in your mind, the Holy Christ in you is waiting your acknowledgement as you. And you are lost and do not know yourself, while he is unacknowledged and unknown. Seek him today and find him. He will be your Saviour from all idols you have made. For when you find him, you will understand how worthless are your idols and how false the images which you believed were you. In A Course in Miracles, when it says that we are made in the image and likeness of God, it's not referring to the physical body. The Course says that the physical body is what we made or what we make through the reproductive act so that souls can have a temporary physical experience. The body is of time and therefore temporary, whereas God created eternal life, eternal being, and that is what we ultimately are. Being and life itself, with the capacity to express our oneself in any way we choose, be that in the form or in the formless. Power, fame, money, physical pleasure. Who is the hero to whom all these things belong? Could they mean anything except to a body? Yet a body cannot evaluate. By seeking after such things, the mind associates itself with the body, obscuring its identity and losing sight of what it really is. Helen Schuckman, the scribe of the Course, had suffered from body image problems and had seen herself as overweight when she was younger. Jesus said to her, "You are a miracle." He tells us in A Course in Miracles that we should all think of ourselves as loving, lovable, and loved. He says, "You are wholly lovely, a perfect shaft of pure light. Before your loveliness the stars stand transfixed and bow to the power of your will." What do children know of their creation except what their Creator tells them? You, who are in the image of the Father, need bow only to him, before whom I kneel with you. This is an alien idea to us because we live in a world that conditions us to believe that we are unloving because we are sinful, that we are unlovable because of what we look like, and that we are unloved because in this world there's no such thing as unconditional love. The evil queen has made her body into an idol. In the mirror mirror version of the story, the evil queen has a rigorous beauty regime which involves putting on a face mask made of bird poo and worms and snakes and bees and other delightful things in order to preserve her beauty. In Snow White and the Huntsman, the evil queen absorbs the life force of pretty young girls to keep herself young. And she bathes in milk to preserve her beauty. In lesson 135 of the course, it says of the body that if you defend its life, or give it gifts to make it beautiful, or walls to make it safe, and you but say, your home is open to the thief of time, corruptible and crumbling, so unsafe. It must be guarded with your very life. Is not this picture fearful? Can you be at peace with such a concept of your home? Yet what endowed the body with the right to serve you thus except your own belief? The body is in need of no defense. This cannot be too often emphasized. It will be strong and healthy if the mind does not abuse it by assigning it to roles it cannot fill, to purposes beyond its scope, and to exalted aims which it cannot accomplish. Such attempts, ridiculous yet deeply cherished, are the sources for the many mad attacks you make upon it, for it seems to fail your hopes, your needs, your values, and your dreams. If the vain queen is not the most beautiful person in the land, what is she for? What's the point of her? She feels that beauty is her identity, and that not being the most beautiful person in the land means the end of her identity, which means her death, and so she must kill her rival. The course says, no, it doesn't say greed is good. It says, grandiosity is always a cover for despair. Grandiosity is without hope because it's not real. It is an attempt to counteract your littleness, based on the belief that the littleness is real. The course says, the essence of grandiosity is competitiveness, i.e., who is the fairest in the land. Back to the quote. The essence of grandiosity is competitiveness because it always involves attack. It is a delusional attempt to outdo, but not to undo. Grandiosity offers you the delusion of attack as a solution. That was a quote from chapter 9. And this type of grandiosity, this type of attitude is similar to that famous Genghis Khan quote, which says, "It's not enough that I succeed, all others must fail." In the original story, the queen asks a huntsman to kill Snow White and bring back her liver and lungs. The huntsman can't bring himself to kill Snow White, so he kills a boar instead and gives its liver and lungs to the queen, which she cooks and eats, believing that they belong to Snow White. In the sweeter Disney version, the evil queen is much nicer. She just wants the huntsman to kill Snow White and bring back her heart as a memento that she can keep in a nice red keepsake box. In Snow White and the Huntsman, the spirit in the mirror, which is like a kind of weird gold creature thing, tells the evil queen that if she consumes Snow White's heart, she will become immortal and forever young. She strikes a bargain with a huntsman called Eric, saying that she will resurrect his beloved dead wife if he brings her Snow White's heart. But the vain queen in the original Brothers Grimm story has to be the most extreme and outrageous one out of all these Snow White stories. "Snow White shall die," she shouts, "if it costs me my life." In the original story, the vain queen tries to kill Snow White a further 3 times. First, with a lace around Snow White's waist to cut off her circulation. Secondly, by pulling a comb of poison through her hair. And thirdly, the famous poison apple. And obviously, the evil queen's obsession with Snow White is unwittingly suicidal. In the Disney movie, the evil queen transforms herself into an old woman using some complicated spells. So she transforms herself into the opposite of a beautiful young woman so that she can eventually end up being the most beautiful woman, which is typical ego confusion. After tricking Snow White into eating the poisonous apple, the evil queen falls off a cliff and gets crushed by a boulder, and then probably gets eaten by the vultures that are circling ominously. But they leave that part to the audience's imagination, because it's still a family film, after all. The evil queen's fate, dying as an old woman, echoes the movie She, where she who must be obeyed dies as a 2,000-year-old woman after things go tragically wrong. Now, when I was a child, about 8 years old, I'd say, a 1965 remake of the movie She, starring Ursula Andress, was on TV one early Sunday evening. I wasn't paying attention to it, it was just on in the background. So, all I saw was 1 second, she who must be obeyed was young and beautiful, and then the next second, and then the next second, and I think it just went on and on until she eventually turned into a corpse. I was terrified, didn't understand what had happened, couldn't get to sleep that night. And I had no idea about the cinematic connection between Snow White and the movie She until I started creating this video. I should conclude with emphasizing that the Course is not saying that the physical body should be ignored. In Chapter 2 of some editions it says, "The body is merely part of your experience in the physical world. Its abilities can be, and frequently are, over-evaluated. However, it is almost impossible to deny its existence in this world, and those who do so are engaging in a particularly unworthy form of denial." So we should still take care of the body, still look after our physical appearance and our physical well-being. We just need to remember that there's a whole lot more to us than the body. It's a part of our physical experience, but not who we are in our entirety. And also we shouldn't equate our feelings of self-worth with how society might perceive our body's physical appearance or view our body's race or genetic differences, for example. We shouldn't measure our feelings of self-worth according to other people's judgments or even our own ego's judgments about the physical body. As Shakespeare said, this world is a stage and everyone has their part. The physical body is just a costume to be laid aside when the play is done. When we're feeling down or negative about ourselves, we can remember these words of Jesus from different passages in the Course. "You are a mirror of truth in which God himself shines in perfect clarity. To the ego's dark glass you need but say, 'I will not look there because I know these images are not true.' Then let the Holy One shine upon you in peace, knowing that this, and only this, must be." Later on in the Course he says, "In this world you can become a spotless mirror in which the wholeness, the holiness of your Creator shines forth from you to all around you. You can reflect heaven here, but no reflections of the images of other gods must dim the mirror that would hold God's reflection in it. Earth can reflect heaven or hell, God or the ego. You need but leave the mirror clean and clear of all the images of hidden darkness you have drawn upon it, and God will shine upon it of himself. We need to remember that we were all originally created as loving and lovable, and that we are all still loved. A Course in Miracles seeks to teach us to see our own inner divine light reflected in everything and everyone we see. Namaste.